Dun, dun, dun. Hey, everybody, welcome back to this episode of Think Live. Looking forward to having CEO Drew Patrick on the show with Skidmore. They're a boutique creative studio based in Detroit. They help companies in the business of food and fun with brand strategy and design. Drew, I'm excited to talk to you because I love talking about strategy. I love talking about branding, and design is the element that brings it all to life, right? Gives the feel, creates the emotional connection. But I want to start with just kind of talking about strategy. I think, we're sitting here today and it's June 16th, 2020, and everybody's rewriting their playbook. And strategy is something that everybody is trying to figure out. What's their next step? What's the next thing to do? How do we grow our brand, et cetera? So as a brand specialist, what does it mean to you as a company?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. The time that we're in has given people an opportunity to pause, maybe reset their thinking on their own brand strategy. And I mean, brand strategy is all about communicating your position and your true, authentic value to your audience, right?
Yeah.
The audience that it's going to resonate with most. And I think there's a recognition across the board that the way the world is going forward is going to be slightly different than the way it was before this all started. So it's a point in time to reassess, okay, is our audience still the same audience that we were talking to? And if it is, and it very well could be, how have their values changed, or what they value?
Right.
How has it changed? And how do we make sure that we are not only meeting that need operationally, but really positioning ourselves to clearly articulate our new offer, our new position, or refined position to that audience, or the slightly adjusted audience that we need to talk to going forward. So it's all about who are we, what are we doing, who are we doing it for, and where do we get a chance to interact? And that's the essence of brand strategy. And to your point, the design is what brings it all to life. So if you're starting upstream, you got to carry it all the way through.
Yeah,
they're going to have to do that.
So how do you do that? So how do you let's go back for a second and talk about the audience, because even if your audience is the same, everybody's mindset is different today. Maybe some more than others a little bit, but I know for the last 3 months, for example, I have grocery shopped and bought everything that we have possibly needed for our house through e-commerce. And so you have e-commerce, you have innovation that is happening so quickly to companies right now. How do they get into the clients? How does a company get into the new client's mindset? Do they determine what it is, and then how do they get into it and speak to it repeatedly?
Yeah, it's a great setup for talking about brand strategy and customer and audience definition. And again, the setting that you're talking to that audience in. And to your point, that setting may have very well changed, right?
Yeah.
But pre-March, how much were people buying online? And grocery delivery is a good example. People were buying groceries online before, but not everyone had to buy groceries online before March 16th. But then there was a period of time where they did. And so it's a new setting. Your value and your who you are and who you're doing it for may be similar, but you're trying to communicate in a different setting, in the e-com setting. So, different messaging strategy is going to work in a different setting. So that's something that has to be considered. And then just behavioral change, right? Like people's behavior is going to be forever adjusted. And I think about the change from just March till now, right? I mean, from mid-March till, I don't know, mid-April, it really wasn't doing anyone any good to do any traditional, please buy my product type of advertising. Right. People weren't in the mood. They still needed products and they still needed services, but your messaging strategy had to change pretty drastically in a short order of time, just because the environment you were working in changed so drastically. So it was really about expressing care and authentic care to the audience who you're working with, and knowing that their behavior is going to it's going to follow. It's going to have to change temporarily, and long term, you just got to maintain the relationships that you have with that audience.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question, Drew. Building relationship capital with clients is so important, and getting the message out, right? Getting a message that is out that is really important. And so we have companies that I think have realized that they have not been living the values. You talk about a lot about values today, not living the values on their wall. And there's sometimes a disconnect between the values and the messaging and the branding that they're doing. And so as we come out of COVID, right, based on kind of that awareness, Randy Denhall wants to know, how has COVID changed market trends and how often are they assessed? And then my question on that is, how are they connecting that now more so than they did pre-COVID to the company values?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think market trends, trends are almost irrelevant at this point, right? It's more about what's a trend today? Right.
I mean, a trend is like, we have 3 months of trending data.
Yeah. And so what is your market condition today? What is your market condition right now? We've seen, and we've been advising clients over the last, even how things have changed from beginning of COVID to mid-COVID to now, state of the country and what's socially important to people right now and the situations that are happening. Messages that seemed appropriate today may not be appropriate tomorrow. So there's a hyper focus more so on acute current conditions of our environment, as opposed to a market trend when we're talking about how do we communicate today.
Yeah. And so let me ask you this. So just want to look at here. So when it comes to trends for tomorrow, right? So looking forward, when a brand is looking at themselves, how do they plan? Do they look a year out? Do they look 6 months out? Do they look 1 month at a time? Branding, how do you wrap in a branding strategy in today's market, and how far out do you go?
Yeah, we're big advocates of having a vision that's out 5 years for your brand, but having 1 year marketing strategies and 90-day marketing plans. So walking it back from that timeline. And then, like we just talked about, in today's environment, though, your tactical marketing plan might adjust daily as opposed to quarterly, just because of how rapidly conditions are changing. But ultimately, your brand strategy, the highest level strategy, this is our position in the market, these are the values we stand for, those should stay consistent, right? To your point, it's not necessarily that our values are changing, it's how we stay true to them. And if we're able to stay true to them in a changing environment with an audience whose needs are changing rapidly. So again, we're doubling down on stick to your values, but make sure that you are living your values. You're not just stating your values as a brand. And what it mean today as differently than it meant yesterday.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think that's great. And so a company that's never really done any branding, let's kind of reverse engineer to that. A company that hasn't done any branding, hasn't done any strategy. What do you say to that company? How do they get started? Because I just want to make my 2 cents comment is that I think a lot of times companies think, we have kind of our core people, we have kind of a little bit of branding and marketing expertise. And so let's kind of sit around a table and figure it out. And they don't invest in themselves, and they don't invest in the company to bring in a strategist to say, hey, this is what your branding message really is and should be, and yada, yada, yada. So, so what is a new company that should be thinking as an investment and time and commitment, and, how do they get started?
And hopefully with a new business, even if it's a new business, they've got their internal focus figured out. So you've got mission, vision, values. Start there. That's really internal focus. Branding is, from our perspective, the external facing strategy that authentically tells the story of what your internal mission, vision, values is attempting to accomplish.
Yeah.
So it starts with positioning. Who are we? What do we do? And who do we do it for that makes us unique and different?
Yeah.
And then from there, how do we communicate that positioning out to a clear audience? So step 2 is defining your audience. And then in expressing your brand, you do that visually and through messaging. We've got a brand framework, Jon, that has 10 components that would really clearly outline what we see as brand and what it means to have a strong brand strategy. I'm happy to share that with your audience if you'd like. But to do that, depending on size and complexity of an entity, defining your brand position, having appropriate brand identity and visual assets, and then having appropriate brand framework, messaging, voice, tone, personality, audience definition. I mean, for a really small company that's got to do it quick and dirty, that's you're talking tens of thousands of dollars. For a company that's established and launching a new brand or a new product line or wants to rebrand their entity, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And when Coke and Pepsi launch a new product line, you're talking millions. So depends on size and scale and complexity, but even for a smaller company, you should really be investing tens of thousands of dollars in developing your brand from our perspective.
Yeah. Well, it's so important. Like how do you define a brand? Like sometimes I think people don't necessarily know what that even really means, like define a brand. What does that mean to you guys at Skidmore?
Yeah. We would say your brand is the culmination of the product, process, and people of your organization that then end up as your public face to the world.
Yeah.
So your brand is authentically who you are, but how you communicate your brand is that public face. Most people just associate it with that public face.
Right.
But it really is your product or service and the people that you have in your organization and processes that bring that product or service to the audience. And then how you tell that story, right? Yeah. We talk about those 4 Ps.
Yeah, no, I love that. I define branding as what people say about you when you leave the room. Like me, that's your brand. And you can spend no money or a ton of money, and if people are saying the wrong thing about you, then you gotta refigure it out. One of the things I think is really important about branding and marketing is the ability to not only bring clients in the door, but the ability to build ambassadors of people who are just have a visceral love for you, your company, your product, etc. And so, can you talk a little bit about building brand ambassadors? Because you have companies like yourself that build the brand awareness and messaging and everything you're talking about. But then there's people out there that are just your brand ambassadors, talking about you and drumming up business. And then you have the work that you do that complements all of that as well. So how do they kind of work hand in hand?
Yeah, you're talking about building a tribe, right? That's what
a tribe, right?
Tribe. And we say that all starts with trying to identify who is most likely to be part of your tribe. Hopefully as business owners and operators, we're all providing a value of some value, right? Out in the world. But who is our value most suited for? Most companies, we do discovery work and try to identify audience and hone it. Too often we hear, well, everyone's my customer. Or, it's people in the US between 21 and 75. It's like, well, that's pretty broad range. So if you can really hone in and focus your messaging and your story on, will you pick a number, 3% of the population, you'll get really clear in what your value is and who it's for. And it's way more likely to resonate with not only that narrow 3%, but people who are on the fringe outside of it, because you're getting really clear in what you're talking about and what your value is. So I'd say that's the place to start to build a tribe, is really get narrow on who your best fit audience is for what you do, and talk to them, and just talk to them. Stop trying to talk to everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. you're talking about, beta testing, easy beta testing that's affordable. Talk to your clients, talk to your potential prospects, start to get a read on what they need, what they want, etc. And so I'm a big fan that everybody should have 3 mentors. I'm a big fan that everybody should be just asking more questions and reaching out to their tribes, their brand ambassadors, whomever that is. So how do you look at, not only for you as far as mentorship, but also how do you advise your clients on a deeper level to reach out and actually execute to do what you just said? Because there's the saying of it, and then there's the doing of it. And I find where most people get stuck is in the execution, that first step to even ask the question.
Yeah. Being willing to just have individual conversations is really valuable. And you talk about, for a small business that has, less than 50 employees to Fortune 500, there's big difference in how you need to accumulate information, right? Or accumulate data. But all of us can talk to people and listen. And as a business trying to information, there's nothing more valuable than first-person feedback.
Yeah.
You want to get that qualitative information where you really understand the depth of individual opinions. On larger scale entities, you need to get the quantitative side to really back it up. But just for example, we always start our engagements with discovery, and that's our research phase. And on every project, big or small, we have to have individual stakeholder conversations, meaning customers, partners, vendors, employees.
Yeah.
Because you get so much information. We're a human-centered design studio, brand and design. So to be human-centered, you gotta talk to humans.
Yeah.
You can't just
that makes sense.
Quantitative data.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, good. Drew, couple last-minute questions.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of kids graduating high school today that are going to college in a world that looks a little bit different. And there are kids graduating college into a different type of business world that they thought they were looking at 3-4 months ago. What piece of advice would you give each group? The kids graduating high school and the kids graduating college?
I'll start with college because that one's easier for me as somebody who potentially hires students coming out of college. But that one is, and I just talked to a recent college grad recently who was asking me for advice. And first thing I'd say is reach out to people for advice.
Yeah.
So I was really impressed that this individual that I didn't know reached out to me, and I gave him 20 minutes of my time.
Yeah.
Because he had the confidence to reach out and be curious and ask questions. And my advice to him during that call was just get to work, do something.
Get to work, Ace, I agree. Yeah.
So get to work and get experience. I thought there was too much worry about being in the right fit situation at 22. It's like
right.
Every situation's the right fit situation at 22.
Right. I agree. It's interesting. This summer, all camps were canceled. So I have a 17-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter. My 17-year-old son, who is a varsity tennis player, and he started a tennis. He's now teaching tennis. That's what he's doing all summer. And a lot of his friends are all starting little companies for the summer until school starts. Or they're getting out and they're working at car washes or Olga's or all of these places, but they're all getting experience, and that is it's so important. I couldn't agree with you more. Just get out
and do something.
Yeah.
And like I said, I started my career as a CPA. It has nothing to do with what I do today.
Yeah.
It was great experience and exposure, and I could have started any number of things. It doesn't really matter where you're starting. It's get out, do something and be effective and work hard and learn.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well said.
And the high school side, it's harder for me because I say, have fun. I don't know. Like the world is going to be okay.
Right. The world. That's a good lesson. Right. The world. I would agree with that. The world's going to be okay, and learn adaptability these next couple of years, and how to be resilient, and how to just figure it out and be innovative.
And I'm talking about that with my team, who's, ranges from mid-20s and on up. And
yeah,
resilience right now is a regular ongoing topic.
Yeah.
Just do what you can do today to be effective, and we'll be okay. But yeah, I have a 20-year-old niece who's in college. And one of the things I'd say to her is, while you should know that the world's going to be okay, recognize that this is a really important time we're living in. It will be one of the times we're going to look back on and say, wow, that was a turning point, an inflection point. So also just pay attention.
Yeah, so that's great. Yeah, that's great. That's a great piece of advice. Pay attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right, Drew, tell people how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah. You can go to skidmorestudio.com and download a lot of content that we talked about, the 4 Ps, the brand framework. You can see it there. If you want to reach out to me direct, happy to give my email out. It's drew@skidmorestudio.com.
Great. Drew, I appreciate it. I'm a big fan of your company. It's been great getting to know you through the years, meeting you at Small Giants. We'll give everybody kind of a Small Giants plug. Yeah. Small Giants, great book, great organization, smallgiants.org. The work you're doing is so important, brand strategy, design, which we really didn't get into as far as just the elements to make everything work, but it's so important. I think it's more important than ever before. I'm a big fan of, especially now in 2020, it is time to double down on your brand. It's time to be more strategic, brainstorm on creative ways to grow your business. It's going to be, you're going to have a lot of work to do, I would imagine, over the next decade. And I wish you all the best. And hold on for 1 second, but I appreciate you being on the show. To everybody who's listening, thank you very much. If Drew can help you, feel free to reach out.
Thanks so much, Jon. Great being on.